London session recap for Wednesday, the 21st of June 2023 for Euro dollar. So as we know on the daily chart, we are bullish, we've mitigated the extreme, and right now we are in that pro-trend swing run phase, whatever you want to call it, right? We're ultimately expecting price to come up and take out this high. However, we are currently pausing from this supply zone to the left, but because order flow is bullish, our expectation is that it should just be a reaction point for a pullback into demand before continuing higher, right? Price does not have to actually come back to demand, okay, at any point, right? That overall bullish momentum can take over and we can continue up. So we do have to be aware of that. But whilst the lower time frame order flow is bearish, we can try and take advantage of that for some quick term shorts. And then if we see that order flow shift bullish, right, then we can try and capture that next internal bullish leg upside to target overall up towards that week high if the overall swing trend, bullish swing trend, is going to continue. Okay, pretty much the exact same story here on the 4-hour chart, right? We know we're coming off that level of 4-hour supply within the daily supply, and we've been trying to trade this bearish order flow short over the last few days, potentially down into around the discount, okay, of the current 4-hour range, just looking to play that pullback down into around these levels. But like I said, ideally price comes down to these levels of demand and then we can look for our longs, but we have to accept the fact that price may not pull back that far. So yesterday we had a nice mitigation of 4-hour supply. It did end up holding and then we got another leg to the downside. But if you look at these candles, right, what can you see? Well, overall, we're falling pretty correctively. So, you know, that in of itself doesn't mean a ton, but it's sort of a little bit of bullish confidence because how do markets typically move? Well, you get impulsive moves, right? Corrective pullbacks, and then that next impulsive leg, right? As we take out all of that buy side liquidity above those highs there. So when you see price kind of not really committing to itself and starting to form quite correctively, that is in the back of my mind that potentially the bears are running out of steam. You see these big wicks showing bullish pressure started to come in. So we have to do think that potentially that pullback could be coming in. You can almost see these sort of equal lows here just getting liquidated yesterday. No real commitment, no candle close below, and bullish pressure coming in. So, you know, it's not really confirmed until we actually start to see order flow shift and take out these highs. But it is a little warning sign in the back of my mind that, you know, potentially this pullback is, you know, starting to finish. So there's no real clear new fresh supply zones for us to work with like we did have yesterday here. So yeah, it's not looking super clean on the 4-hour chart for sort of an immediate bias for the London session. So I'm just going to pray this a little bit forward to nearer Frankfurt Open. Okay, and price was around here. So we can see the internal structure, you know, has been bearish to facilitate that larger pullback. Again, some of you may have that as your swing structure, and that's absolutely fine. It can even help you to keep it a little bit more simple, as you'll see now as we start to get the internal price action. But everyone should be able to follow along and have the same expectations of price, right? In that this is the current M15 range. We have pulled back to above the EQ of the range, right? Being here, that's the premium of the range. So we know that when price pulls back to value, up to the premium, that increases the probability that this pullback may be finished, okay? And we may be ready to then target another, you know, internal leg down to around this week low, particularly as we aren't coming off anywhere on the 4-hour chart too significant yet. We haven't reached a 4-hour discount. We haven't reached 4-hour or daily demand. So there's decent probability that we can still get another bearish leg to the downside. Despite the fact that we have liquidated, you know, big pool of sell side liquidity here with these big equal lows, and the 4-hour chart had a big wick. Okay, so you know we can see this going either way, but for now the M15 for sure is showing much more bearish pressure. So coming into the session, what do I immediately want to do? Well, I'm not really too keen to look for longs because there's not really a ton of confidence for that, right? We haven't even, you know, really broken out of this range just yet, right? That being the leg, we're kind of just moving sideways. But because we've moved up to the premium, we have had a bearish change of character. We're starting to see supply hold. You know, I'm thinking, okay, potentially the pullback's over and we're now going to get that next leg. So, you know, I'm kind of interested in shorts, but immediately I want to see this demand level fail, right? Because if we look at the more recent price action, kind of see that as a small internal leg, right? And then price is coming into this low. So I don't really want to short against that in case we're going to get another leg up to here. And this is obviously going to be the high probable supply zone, right? Because this is the unmitigated extreme within this range, right? Kind of, there's nothing really too clear up here. You know, this is where we flipped that nice level of demand and then led eventually to that break of structure. We have some nice lids, right? Inducement with all of these highs here. it swept liquidity. It was a strong sweep of liquidity as well because this high here broke that low there, right? And you can see price came up, grabbed the liquidity and moved. So in on its own, this is a high probable POI, which I would love to then look for shorts to try and capture that next leg if the internal structure is to remain bearish. So immediate bias, not really much going on. Nothing I'm really interested in. I want to see ideally price go lower, then potentially look for price to come into here and look for shorts and then capture that next leg whilst being aware of, say, this level here that we may come into here, get another bullish leg, and then we go, or potentially the 4-hour chart and the daily chart's taken over now and we may get that movement. So you have to be aware of all of that. So we play price forward a little bit. We did initially get an initiation out of the range, so I thought we were going to get that sort of forecast where we're getting a clear commitment below, almost an eyeboss there, right? Then pull back into this strong high and then look for that movement. But what happened? We get a big liquidity grab of that low here. Now it's a bit of a subtle one, but we did actually get a bullish M15 change of character because, actually no, we didn't. You can ignore me there. We didn't. So yeah, my markup, I have an invalid shock, and the reason why is because all of these candles break the previous candle's low, so it's not a valid M15 shock there. Yeah, no, it's not. Okay, cool. But either way, no real commitment below that low, right? We failed to close below, so kind of warning signs of bullish pressure. But keep an eye on this level just in case we get something clean, right? But potentially we can go, but this is not really a good sign. Now I did mark up sort of a potential entry. It wasn't really that clean, but it's where we got a break of this high here. So it's more sort of like M5 lid. It's not really M15 lid, so it's not really that great of an entry. Just put this forward a little bit. But essentially you can see that structural high to the left. Price liquidates that high. So this is obviously the M1 PBL, the orange box. That then fails. Eventually you get a flip of the level, which is what this grey box is here, right? It's the flip of the PBL. You've got your M1 shock in here, and then that's a potential entry. You're essentially playing the liquidity sweep of this structural high here, so then try and capture that next leg to the downside. If you use the trail to break even method, then your stop would now be at break even, and eventually you would have got taken out for a break even there. So it's sort of a trade, but it's really not great, right? The M15 is just terrible, really. We're trading between this high and this low. Like I said, there was some confluence to suggest that pullback may be over. Really want to see a clear commitment below that demand zone here, which we failed to do. We kind of wicked, moved up, and then played a little sweep of this high. It's more on the M5. It's not really that clean. We haven't mitigated the refined level. It's all looking pretty messy. So not the best of trades. Bit more of an aggressive sort of scalp within there, but hopefully you should have taken a break even, if anything at all. So now we come into the supply zone, so potentially you may want to look for shorts, but I would be very, very wary of this at this point when you're seeing this sort of price action. Right, price clearly moves to the upside, no closure below. I don't believe there was an entry, but yeah, I'd be waiting at this point for price to come up higher to our high probable zone, just moving sideways at this point. Yeah, and then we push up higher. But where are you coming into? You're coming into this low here, right? We're starting to see that bullish order flow. So this is why when you start to see price just moving sideways and it's not clear, no commitment, no real clear eyeboss, just let it sort itself out. And I can see the majority of you were discussing that in the analysis, which was good to see. Just be patient, especially, and this is a real key part of kind of the analysis, is where we are, right? What's the 4-hour chart doing? Yes, we haven't pulled back to the EQ, but we know we don't have to. We've got a sweep of these big equal lows. We're starting to see those big wicks coming in. Doesn't mean that we're going to go up necessarily, but these are things you want to factor into your analysis, right? That you may want to be a lot less aggressive with trying to take shorts within here compared to when we're at the start of the move, right? Trying to trade heavily counter trend against the daily, against the 4-hour chart, et cetera, et cetera. You can start to see how it's getting a lot more indecisive as the bulls are starting to step in. So now we come up to the much higher level of supply. But what do we have from internal structure? We're starting to form more bullish internal of the internal, right? We can call it small internal if it's easier to keep track of. Where you can see this, right? We get a clear break and closure above the high. This becomes somewhat of a strong internal low. So we can get short from within here, right? Because that could be the larger internal pullback finish, and we could be going down here. But we also have to accept that this is a strong low. So we could get short, come into this demand, which then could hold, and we could get another bullish leg upside, or potentially even switch bullish if that's the end of the 4-hour pullback, right? So you have to be wary of that. I know we'll get some questions about this. So could you view this here as a bullish IBOS instead, right, instead of this one here. For me, they're both valid. I'm aware of both. But when we kind of get this larger pullback like this, I just focus on the pullback price action, and that would be my internal structure. Okay, so a lot more bullish pressure coming in, so I'll be wary of this demand zone here for sure. So we just draw on this IBOS here. Okay, so it's kind of like your IBOS, if you want to call it that. I'll just get rid of these surprise ones here. Okay, just to clean things up a bit. So you can see a big liquidation of all of these Asia lows, right? Move to the upside, bullish IBOS. So it's a decent amount of bullish pressure coming in where potentially we could get at, but then it's also similar to what we had yesterday, actually, where we'll zoom out, right? We got the bullish IBOS here. Price came back in, respected the demand and pushed up again. However, this larger range here actually ended up holding. So I thought there was a decent potential we could come into this demand and push up higher, right? That the 4-hour swing pullback maybe finished, but during the London low in New York, it ended up holding. We got a sweep of the high and we pushed down, and yeah, structure stayed intact. That strong high was never breached. So there's potential, right? We could be getting the same thing. So yeah, something to bear in mind that may fail and we may get another move there to the downside. So ideally, what you want to do in that session, in the situation where you can kind of build both a good bullish and bearish case, is ideally we want to be getting in short up here immediately, so we can already have our risk removed or even take profits as price comes down to this demand. We already want to be in the trade. We don't want to be going, okay, here's our entry short in the lower time frame. Price then already fulfills its objective. It already pulls back to demand, and then we have our limit order on here trading against this mitigation, right? That's not what we want to be doing, because now you're trading from a weak high, and there's a decent probability that that could be the move. So that's why we want to try and get in, quickly. So if we jump down to the lower time frames, okay, we want to see that liquidity build. So if you want to use this liquidity here, this M15 high, right, where's the PBL? There you go, you got M1 PBL down here. Otherwise, we need to see it built in the price action here, right, that actually pulls back. So if we play this forward, you can see that the fractal structure just keeps making higher highs and higher lows, okay, and then eventually, so none of these lows are broken. This is price just moving up and up and up. So none of these are strong liquidations. We need a high to break a low first, which, just move this out of the way. This high eventually breaks this low, right? So we get an M1 change of character, a nice V-shaped reaction. So this is the first high out of this price action that's actually broken some structure. So if you're waiting for the fake break, then this is the high that you need to see get liquidated, right? And that would then produce the strong liquidity that we need. Otherwise, this is the M1 PBL, right, that liquidated the M15 highs to the left. Now, what I will say is, because of where we are within the M15, kind of what was similar to talking about yesterday, because it's a high probability POI, right, because it's pro M15 trend, or at least pro the range that we're looking to trade, and because this is the unmitigated extreme, this is where you may want to be a little bit more, let's say, aggressive with your entry requirements, and you may not want to necessarily wait for a clear liquidation on the M1 price action, because you may just want to get involved and see if we can try and capture that next leg. And also, it's not like there was no liquidity, right? We have all of this liquidity built up here that has now been taken. We've pushed deep into the POI, and we're getting a strong reaction. So for you, that may be enough confidence to go, do you know what, I'm just going to take a standard sort of chalk entry, because you can see there's been enough liquidity in the overall setup, and you may just want to get involved, right? Whether you take the extreme or the flip, depending on your rules, that's something you may want to consider, right? But in terms of an actual M1 liquidity entry model, there isn't a valid one as of yet, right? Because you need that high to go, or something with this PBL down here. But as I'll talk about in a minute as we get there, I wouldn't be interested in using this M1 PBL because of the M15, right? And that's why we always say, do not just sit on the M1, right? You want to be constantly reassessing what is the M15 doing. And the fact that we didn't get anything up here, and now we're already down, that's back in line with what I was saying on the M15, right? Is the objective is now complete. And we fall back to the M15 demand. So I don't now want to be leaving any short orders on here on the M1, in case it's looking very likely at this point that this was a mitigation of supply just to come into demand to now push up higher. So when that happens, I'm not interested in shorts. I need to see that high go and something else new build. Potentially, you could look for longs as well if you fancy that. If you fancy trading against this and trying to anticipate that we're going to get that next move in line with the 4-hour chart, then yeah, you could be maybe aggressive with that. It's totally down to you. But we're coming towards the end of the session now. Yeah, this is the past the session, so that there's absolutely no trades there. So a sort of, in my opinion, low probability, poor M15 trade idea down here, and it's not even the most valid of trades really, because it wasn't valid M15 lid. I don't think it was just M5 lid. So definitely a trade that I think isn't really worth the risk, in my opinion. Then we came into the high probable POI on the M15, but there was no M1 liquidity entry model. However, you may have wanted to be a bit more aggressive because of all of the other conflicts in the M15 and because of that big liquidity pool to the left that we've taken out. Nice big V-shaped reaction from behind the EQ of the zone. Think of a lot of the orders you may have wanted to set an entry order. I don't believe you would have got tagged, no, not even on the flip. And then by the time we come down to here, end of session, we're in M15 demand, no trades. If you're trading the M1, would be my advice. Yeah, nothing there. I don't know where we are now, but sort of a similar scenario to yesterday. So I'm quite interested to see what will happen next. Whether, right, the larger internal range is going to hold and play out because that structure is still intact, right? Like we had here, from the high, we came down, the high was never breached. So that then takes over and we're now ready to target that low. Are we now going to get that same thing, right? Where we're just going to have a bit of a pause in demand and eventually push through, because where are we on the 4-hour chart? We have not yet mitigated the EQ or any demand. That's the 4-hour EQ down here. So there's this probability we're still going to have that next leg to the downside. However, like I was saying, if we do want to look for trying to go, what would the bulls be thinking? Well, we can see that bullish pressure coming in. We're kind of failing to break below these lows here. Potentially we're going to push up higher. I have absolutely no idea. So this is where you may also want to trade both sides of the market if you wish to do so, where you may want to try, if it was during session, try and get long within here. Okay, essentially playing the smaller internal structure. So this being this, and trying to see if we're going to get another bullish leg to the upside. But you have to just accept the risk that, in theory is lower probability because the large internal structure is still bearish. We've mitigated the extreme supply zone. So yeah, my advice would be, if you're not consistent, don't start trying to trade the internal, stay kind of on this stuff, try and trade in line with that, and be aware of it. But like I said, once we get that mitigation in here, on the M1 or the M5, whatever, you kind of want to be in short before we get down to here, in case this holds and in case we get that next movement there to the upside. If you do take risk entries, then yeah, this is definitely the type of trade in which, or the type of POI I should say, in which I would look for that. You may want to refine that a little bit with the 25% and then look to target that low there for another move. I think that's definitely a decent trade. Otherwise, the most ideal scenario for shorts into New York would be you get something like this, where you get a flip of this demand. We get the bearish IBOS, the IIBOS, right? So that confirms what? When we get that bearish IBOS here, the internal, what does that do? That signals the end of this larger internal pullback. The small internal structure is now also bearish. Now you have full alignment. Potentially you've got a nice flip zone within here, right? And you look for shorts within here to try and target that low. That would sort of be your most ideal scenario, where you kind of have all of the M15 then in full alignment. Otherwise, if it's not clear, do not be afraid to be patient and wait for when we get the nice, clear and obvious stuff like we did at the start of the week, right? Where there's no questions involved. It's just, let's try and get short and try and capture the next leg because you have that full alignment. Cool. Hope you guys took some value from that. Have a good New York session if you're trading it, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.